"What you got there, Dave?" he asked, squinting at the pile. "Looks like you're building a moon rocket. Trapped." I couldn't exactly lie to Gary, he sees everything. So I gave him the edited version. "Just upgrading the irrigation system a bit, Gary. You know, efficiency." His eyes lit up. "Underground sprinklers! Attaboy! Best decision you'll ever make. Did that myself back into '98. Tough job, but worth it." "Say," he leaned in conspiratorially, "I've still got my old trencher in the shed if you want to borrow it. Bit rusty, might need some coaxing, but she's a beast." Oh, Gary. Your definition of beast and mine were about to have a serious disagreement. It was a Saturday. One of those perfect late spring Saturdays where the sun is warm but not trying to actively melt your face off. The birds were chirping, probably mocking my neighbor Carol's patchy excuse for a flower bed, and the air smelled like freshly cut grass because, yeah, I'd just mowed. Twice. Because perfection requires effort, people. There are people who meditate, people who do yoga, people who collect artisanal toothpicks, I guess. Me? I water my lawn. This isn't just grass, people. This is poetry. Kentucky bluegrass mix, 70/30ths blend with perennial ryegrass for resilience. You don't just sprinkle poetry, you nurture it. You caress it with the life-giving nectar from the municipal water supply via your trusty hose. And my hose? Oh, she was a beauty. 50 feet of reinforced, kink-resistant, rubbery goodness. We called her Old Faithful. Cheesy? Maybe. But she understood me. She knew the exact pressure needed for the delicate dance between hydration and drowning. We were a team. Me, Old Faithful, and 1,500 square feet of suburban perfection. I was out there, performing the sacred ritual, the gentle huss of the water, hitting the blades a symphony to my ears. I had my technique down, slow, overlapping sweeps, ensuring every single blade got its fair share. It was zen, pure, unadulterated, grassy zen, until the disturbance in the force. A flicker of movement caught my eye. Next door, behind the perfectly aligned HOA-approved beige curtains of number 12, a shadow shifted. Ah, the neighborhood watch herself. Carol Perkins, probably timing my water usage down to the nanoliter with a stopwatch synchronized to a satellite orbiting Jupiter. Now, Carol and I had history. Not like history, more like a series of low-grade skirmishes fought across the DMZ of our shared property line. There was the Great Recycling Bin incident of 23. Mine was allegedly 3 inches too close to the curb. The leaf blower standoff of 24, apparently the decibels generated by clearing autumnal debris, offended her prize-winning begonias. She lived for this stuff. Finding fault was her cardio, and my lawn? My beautiful, thriving, verdant lawn which sat next to her adequate lawn? I think it genuinely pained her. It was just too damn green. I tried to ignore the twitching curtain. Focus on the fescue, Dave, I told myself. Be the blade. But the force disturbance intensified. The front door of number 12 creaked open. And there she stood, Carol Perkins, in all her visor-wearing, clipboard-clutching glory. Her posture screamed indignation. Seriously, if disapproval was an Olympic sport, she'd have more gold medals than Michael Phelps. She marched across her inferior lawn, stopping precisely at the invisible line separating our domains. "David!" Her voice could curdle milk at 50 paces. "Are you aware it's 10:03 a.m.? I glanced down at Old Faithful, then back at her, summoning my most placid, non-committal expression. "Morning, Carol. Lovely day, isn't it?" "Don't lovely day me, David. Watering hours ended at 10 a.m. according to Bylaw 7, subsection C, paragraph 4. You know the rules." She tapped her imaginary clipboard for emphasis. Or maybe it was real. With Carol, you never knew. I pulled out my phone, making a show of checking the time. Huh. According to this thing, which syncs with the atomic clock in Boulder, Colorado, mind you, it's precisely 9:58 a.m. Maybe your sundial needs recalibrating? Okay, maybe a little snarky. Sue me. Her eyes narrowed. Don't be facetious. You always push the limits, wasting water like it's going out of style. Some of us are trying to be environmentally conscious. This from the woman whose ancient sprinkler system regularly watered more of the sidewalk than her actual lawn, usually starting at 3 a.m. and running until dawn. The irony was thicker than my thatch layer. Carol, it's grass. It needs water to live, basic biology. And I think my targeted hand-watering technique is probably saving more water than your geyser impersonation every morning. Mistake. Never criticize the enemy's tactics directly. My system is grandfathered in, she snapped. Yours is flagrant. This is the last time, David. I'm reporting this constant, flagrant water wastage to the HOA. We'll see how you water your precious poetry then. And with that, she spun on her sensible walking shoe heel and marched back to her beige fortress, leaving me sputtering in her wake. Flagrant? Flagrant? It was water. On grass. What's next? Banning sunlight for being too aggressively yellow. I shook my head, coiling Old Faithful with perhaps a little more force than necessary. Carol and her empty threats. She was always reporting something. Mr. Henderson down at the HOA probably had a dedicated Carol Perkins complaint filing cabinet, probably labeled Ignore Pile. Oh, how wrong I was. That evening, after wrestling with a particularly passive-aggressive spreadsheet for work, I settled down to check my personal emails. Bills, spam, newsletter from that artisanal cheese place I bought from once, and then I saw it, from Oakwood Meadows HOA. Email address removed. Subject, formal warning and temporary hose usage restriction. Lot 4B. My blood ran cold. Lot 4B. That's me. Brenda was reading a book nearby, blissfully unaware of the impending doom. No, I whispered. No way. I clicked it open. My eyes scanned the bureaucratic jargon. Following repeated violations of established water usage schedule guidelines. As reported by a concerned neighbor. Gee, I wonder who? Privilege of utilizing handheld hose apparatus for lawn irrigation purposes is hereby suspended. Effective immediately for a period of 30 days. Dustinti, pending review by the Architectural Control Committee. Watering cans remain permissible for essential plant life only. I read it aloud to Brenda, my voice rising with each unbelievable phrase. She did it! I finally choked out, staring blankly at the screen. The hose-hating harpy actually did it! Banned! My hose! Old Faithful! Banned! For 30 days! My lawn... Bren, my lawn will be a barren wasteland. It'll turn the color of beige sadness. Brenda sighed, marking her page. Dave, honestly, it's just grass. And maybe, just maybe, you were watering a couple of minutes late? It was 2 minutes, I practically yelled. Allegedly, according to her possibly faulty sundial, this isn't about water, Bren, don't you see? This is about control. This is about petty neighborhood tyranny. This means war. She gave me that look, the one that says, I love you, but you are bordering on insane. War? Dave, it's Carol. And the HOA. You'll use a watering can for a few weeks. The lawn will survive. But it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about the principle. The sheer, unadulterated injustice. Watering cans? For this? That majestic expanse of emerald green? That was like trying to paint the Sistine Chapel with a Q-tip. It was an insult. No, No, this slight against Old Faithful, against the very soul of my lawn, could not stand. An idea began to form in the dark, petty corners of my mind. An idea so audacious, so complex, so beautiful. Carol wanted a water war? Oh, she was about to get one. Fought on my terms. Underground. The next few evenings were a blur. Forget Netflix, forget scrolling mindlessly through social media. My life became a deep dive into the subterranean world of residential irrigation. My Google search history started looking like a plumber's fever dream crossed with a spy novel. Stealth watering systems. Underground sprinklers, HOA loophole. Best trenching shovel for covert ops. How to annoy neighbor legally using water. Carol Perkins' voodoo doll. Just kidding. Mostly. Suddenly, a world of possibilities opened up. A world where water flowed like magic, unseen, unheard, directly onto my grass, leaving Carol blissfully, infuriatingly unaware. A world of solenoid valves, manifolds, polypipes, pop-up rotor heads, and smart controllers controllable via phone app. Phone app. No hose required. Checkmate, Carol. Check. Mate. I devoured YouTube tutorials. So many cheerful guys in tool belts making it look like assembling Legos. Hey folks, DIY Dan here. Today we're going to install a 12-zone system before lunch. Yeah, right, Dan. You probably have, actual skills. And soil that isn't 50% rocks and 50% clay compacted to the density of a neutron star. The online shopping carts started filling up. Rain sensors? Absolutely. Wi-Fi-enabled controller? Obviously. Valve manifold box. Get the jumbo size. Pipe? So much pipe. Brenda walked in while I was comparing the specs of different rotary nozzles. Dave, what is all this? She asked, peering over my shoulder. Is that a commercial-grade valve manifold? I minimized the browser window faster than a teenager caught looking at, well, you know. Research, I said, a little too quickly. For work, cloud infrastructure stuff, very complex, virtual pipes. It looked like you were pricing out enough actual pipe to replumb the entire county, she said, unconvinced. Scalability, Bren, I puffed up. Always think scalability. The boxes started arriving a few days later. Lots of boxes. Heavy boxes. Long, awkward boxes. I felt like a smuggler trying to hustle them into the garage under the ever-watchful gaze of number 12. I could practically feel Carol's laser eyes boring into my back. What's David up to now? Suspicious packages. Must report to HOA. Just as I wrestled the last box of sprinkler heads inside, Gary from 2 doors down ambled over. Gary's retired, wears Hawaiian shirts year-round, and considers neighborhood drama his primary source of entertainment. What you got there, Dave? He asked, squinting at the pile. Looks like you're building a moon rocket. Trapped. I couldn't exactly lie to Gary, he sees everything. So I gave him the edited version. Just upgrading the irrigation system a bit, Gary, you know, efficiency. His eyes lit up. Underground sprinklers. Attaboy. Best decision you'll ever make. Did that myself back in '98. Tough job, but worth it. Say, he leaned in conspiratorially. I've still got my old trencher in the shed if you want to borrow it. Bit rusty, might need some coaxing, but she's a beast. Oh, Gary, your definition of beast and mine were about to have a serious disagreement. Cut to Saturday morning. Me in the backyard, facing Gary's beast. It looked less like a helpful tool and more like a medieval torture device someone had bolted a lawnmower engine to. Rust wasn't the word. It looked like it had been stored at the bottom of a lake. Just gotta pull this cord here, Gary had instructed. But give it some welly. I gave it some welly. Nothing. I gave it more welly, channeling all my frustration at Carol. The beast coughed, sputtered, let out a shotgun-like bang that made a nearby squirrel fall out of a tree, and then silence, followed immediately by the sound of Carol's back door sliding open and her head poking out, scanning for the source of the ordnance. "Maybe later," I muttered, shoving the demonic trencher back towards Gary's property. Shovels. It would have to be shovels. Old school, stealth school. Thus began Operation Covert Dig. Phase 1. Trench warfare. My brilliant plan involved digging primarily under the cover of darkness or in the pre-dawn hours, when Carol was, presumably, recharging her indignation batteries. This plan rapidly collided with reality. Night digging. Turns out digging precise graded trenches by the weak beam of a headlamp while trying not to wake the entire neighborhood, or, more importantly, Brenda, is challenging. Every rock I hit, and oh, there were rocks the size of Volkswagens, sent a clang echoing through the silent night that sounded, to my paranoid ears, like a church bell announcing my illicit activities. I'd freeze, heart pounding, convinced I'd see Carol's silhouette in the window. Once, her porch light did flick on. I dove behind a bewildered-looking rhododendron covered in mud, pretending to be shrubbery? She scanned the yard, then thankfully went back inside. Early morning digging. Slightly better visibility, but now it was a race against time. Carol was an early riser. I'd be frantically shoveling, sweat dripping, mud accumulating, listening for the telltale click of her blinds going up. The moment I heard it, it was a mad scramble to hide the shovel, kick some loose dirt over the trench, and try to look like I was just out enjoying the pre-dawn air, contemplating the dew, definitely not excavating my lawn like a crazed badger. Brenda became my reluctant lookout and coffee supplier. "She's at the window," she'd whisper-hiss from the patio door. "Act natural." "Natural?" I hissed back, wrestling with a tree root that seemed anchored to the earth's core. "Bren, I'm covered in mud, engaged in subterranean combat with the Ents of Oakwood Meadows. What part of this is natural?" "Remind me why we're doing this?" she asked one particularly grueling morning, handing me a steaming mug. "For the lawn, Bren," I said, wiping sweat and mud from my brow. "For justice." "Right," she sighed. "Justice, which looks suspiciously like miles of ugly ditches. We unearthed some treasures along the way. A plastic army man, tragically KIA. A suspiciously buried dog toy, we don't have a dog. An entire brick, and that one root. That root deserves its own saga. It took me nearly 2 hours, a saw, an axe, borrowed discreetly from Gary, and language that would make a sailor blush before I finally severed it. I think I heard Carol mutter, "Goodness gracious," from her side of the fence during the particularly sweary part. Finally, after what felt like weeks but was probably only 2 very long weekends, the trenches were dug. Now came the plumbing. Following the diagrams that came with the sprinkler kit felt like trying to translate ancient hieroglyphics written by someone who'd had one too many espressos. PVC cement fumes probably didn't help my cognitive function. Cutting pipe, connecting fittings, burying valves. It was slow, tedious work. I developed a newfound respect for actual plumbers, and a deep hatred for PVC primer, which stains everything purple. Then came the moment of truth. The first secret test run. It was well after midnight. Stars were out. Carol was hopefully dreaming of HOA violations. I nervously opened the shiny new app on my phone, selected Zone 1 and hit Start. Nothing. My heart sank. All that work. For nothing? I checked the connections in the valve box. Then I realized I hadn't actually turned the main water supply to the system back on. Idiot. Okay, take 2. Water on. App open. Zone 1. Start. A sprinkler head near the patio popped up with a satisfying thunk. Success. Followed immediately by a jet of water shooting directly onto our kitchen window with the force of a fire hose. Brenda, who had come to watch, yelped and jumped back. "Okay, nozzle adjustment needed," I muttered. Zone 2. Another head popped up and dribbled. Just a pathetic little gurgle of water wetting a circle the size of a dinner plate. Zone 3. This one popped up, spun wildly like a dervish, and launched a laser beam of water clear over the house, landing somewhere in the Gundersons' yard on the other side. I heard a faint splash, and possibly an angry cat noise. "Okay," I said through gritted teeth. Maybe DIY Dan skipped a few crucial steps in his video. The next few nights were spent fine-tuning, adjusting nozzle arcs with tiny screwdrivers in the dark, tightening connections, consulting frantically typed questions on lawn care forums at 2 a.m. Help! Rotor head spraying neighbor's cat. Eventually, painstakingly, I got it dialed in. Each zone covering its designated area, overlap just right, no rogue geysers or pathetic dribbles. Meanwhile, the great hose ban continued. I made a big show of dutifully using a tiny, bright green watering can on the single potted geranium on my front porch. I'd nod sadly at my lawn, sigh dramatically, and give Carol a wave if she happened to be watching. She always was. But a funny thing was happening. Despite the conspicuous lack of Old Faithful, my lawn wasn't turning beige. In fact, it looked better. Greener. Lusher. The secret early morning watering cycles were working wonders. This did not escape Carol's notice. Her patrols along the property line increased. She'd stop, squint, tilt her head. I saw her examining blades of grass, presumably looking for signs of dehydration that simply weren't there. She started asking leading questions. "Funny weather we're having, David," she commented one afternoon while I was admiring my geranium. "Barely rained a drop, yet your grass looks remarkably vibrant. Using a lot of essential plant life watering cans, are we?" "Good soil, Carol," I replied cheerfully. "Excellent drainage, and positive affirmations. I whisper encouragement to the fescue each morning. Seems to be working." The look she gave me could have withered concrete. I heard later, via Gary, the neighborhood grapevine incarnate, that she had actually reported suspiciously green lawn activity despite hose ban to Mr. Henderson at the HOA. Apparently, he was baffled but promised to keep an eye on the situation. Bless his conflict-avoidant heart. The suspicion was palpable. She knew something was up. She just couldn't figure out what. Yet. The system was dialed in, perfect, silent, automated hydration delivered under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness. I could activate it from my phone while still in bed. Sipping coffee, watching through the window as delicate arcs of water gave my lawn its morning drink. It was pure, unadulterated, technologically superior satisfaction. "Look at that," I murmured to Brenda one morning, pointing outside. "Silent, efficient, invisible. It's beautiful, isn't it? A technological middle finger hidden beneath a carpet of glorious green." Brenda just shook her head, but I saw a flicker of a smile. "Just don't let it go to your head, tech wizard." The near miss happened a few days later. I'd started the cycle a little later than usual, around 5:45 a.m. Sunrise was painting the sky, the sprinklers were doing their silent ballet, and then I saw her. Carol. Out for her power walk, half an hour earlier than usual. Panic! I fumbled for my phone, fingers greasy from the toast I was eating. App open. All zones off. Now! The sprinklers began to retract, sinking back into the lawn like guilty prairie dogs. Most were down by the time she rounded the corner onto our block. But one head, right near the sidewalk at the edge of Zone 4, was always a bit sluggish. It hesitated for a split second before fully retracting. Carol power-walked past. Her eyes scanned my lawn, still suspiciously green. Then her gaze flickered down towards the sidewalk. She paused. There was a small, rapidly evaporating damp patch on the concrete, right where the slowpoke sprinkler had been. She frowned, squinted at the lawn again, then at the pavement. A flicker of confusion, maybe dawning realization, crossed her face. She shook her head slightly and continued her walk, but her pace seemed slower, more thoughtful, more calculating. She knew, or at least she suspected. The game was afoot. The confrontation came that weekend, Saturday afternoon. I was outside, ostensibly weeding, which mostly involved admiring my sprinkler-fed lawn, when I saw the procession coming down the street. Carol, marching with grim determination and trailing reluctantly behind her. Poor Mr. Henderson, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, possibly undergoing a root canal. He clutched a manila folder like a shield. "David!" Carol's voice preceded her like a herald of doom. "We need to talk." Mr. Henderson offered a weak, apologetic smile. Gary, predictably, materialized on his porch with a lawn chair and what looked suspiciously like a bag of popcorn. Showtime. "Carol, Mr. Henderson," I said, leaning casually on my unused rake. "What can I do for you on this fine afternoon?" "Mr. Henderson," Carol began, ignoring me and addressing the hapless HOA president, "I insist you investigate this situation. David's hose privileges remain suspended, yet his lawn," she gestured dramatically, "thrives. It defies logic. It mocks the very bylaws we live by. There is illicit watering happening." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, shuffling his feet. "Now, Carol, let's all remain calm. David," he turned to me, sweat beading on his forehead despite the mild temperature. "Carol has registered some concerns regarding your lawn's, hydration levels relative to Bylaw 7C and the current restrictions." I adopted my most innocent expression. "My lawn? Why, thank you for noticing, Carol. It really is doing well this year. Must be the good soil prep I did last fall. And, you know, morning dew. Very beneficial, the dew." Carol scoffed loud enough to startle a nearby robin. "Dew? This is not dew. I saw something, Henderson, right here." She pointed vehemently at the spot near the sidewalk where the slow sprinkler had betrayed me. "A metallic glint, just before it vanished, and moisture on the pavement, where there should be no moisture." Mr. Henderson looked increasingly desperate. "A glint, you say, Carol? Maybe it was—" "Don't you dare say sunlight." Carol cut him off. "I know what I saw. He's cheating. Dig up the lawn, Henderson. Find the illegal pipes." "Dig up my lawn? Oh, hell no." Brenda was watching nervously from the front window now. Gary was definitely eating popcorn. "Okay, Dave. It's time. Enough sneaking. Enough plausible deniability. Time for the grand finale." I stood up straight, dropping the innocent act. A slow smile spread across my face. "Illicit watering, Carol?" I asked, my voice dripping with faux surprise. No, not illicit at all, just upgraded." I pulled out my phone with a theatrical flourish. The same phone Carol had seen me checking suspiciously near the lawn. "You see, Carol," I continued, holding the phone aloft like a wizard revealing his spellbook, "you banned my hose. Old Faithful is resting comfortably in the garage, respecting the HOA's decision." I paused for dramatic effect. "But you didn't ban technology." Her eyes narrowed. Mr. Henderson looked utterly bewildered. With a tap on the screen, the All Zones manual start button I'd pre-selected, it happened. Thunk, 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 thunk. All across my perfect lawn, like a well-drilled squadron, the sprinkler heads popped up, smoothly, silently. And then the water, beautiful, even arcs began to sweep across the grass, droplets catching the afternoon sun, creating tiny, fleeting rainbows. It was majestic. It was automated. It was utterly, undeniably hose-free. Carol's jaw dropped. I mean, literally dropped. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Henderson just stared, mouth slightly agape, his manila folder forgotten at his side. From across the street, Gary let out a whoop and started clapping. "Sprinklers!" Carol finally sputtered, finding her voice. It was shaky with outrage. "Underground sprinklers! Is that even allowed? Mr. Henderson, check the bylaws, find the loophole, shut it down!" Mr. Henderson fumbled with his folder, frantically flipping through pages. "Well, let's see. Bylaw 7, subsection C, pertains specifically to handheld hoses and portable oscillating sprinklers regarding the timed restrictions." He squinted at the page. Underground, permanently installed irrigation systems aren't explicitly, mentioned in this particular subsection regarding temporary bans. I couldn't help myself. I grinned, smugly. "Exactly," I said, putting my phone back in my pocket. "No hose, no problem. Fully automated, weather-aware, smart irrigation. It's actually more water-efficient than hand watering, Carol. Saves the community water resources. I'm practically an eco-warrior." Okay, the eco-warrior part was maybe laying it on a bit thick, but the sheer audacity felt good. Just then, as if on cue, the slightly misaligned sprinkler head near the sidewalk, the traitor from before, gave a final, sputtering sweep as its cycle ended. And a fine mist of water landed directly on Carol Perkins' sensible walking shoes. She let out a small shriek, jumping back. It wasn't a soaking, just a statement. The look on her face was a glorious cocktail of fury, defeat, and damp footwear. Checkmate. Weeks later, a fragile peace settled over Oakwood Meadows. Lot 4B. Carol still glared, but the complaints about my watering habits ceased. I heard she'd shifted her focus to Mrs. Henderson's non-native rose bushes down the street. Bless her heart. Mr. Henderson did circulate a memo about scheduling an emergency HOA meeting to discuss and clarify bylaws pertaining to subterranean irrigation systems and emerging smart home technologies. But everyone knew that meant it might get discussed sometime before the next ice age. Maybe. Old Faithful remains coiled in the garage, a respected veteran enjoying her retirement. I, on the other hand, take immense satisfaction in activating my underground network, sometimes purely for the joy of watching the heads pop up while giving Carol a cheerful wave. Brenda just shakes her head, though I swear I see amusement in her eyes. "You and that lawn," she said the other day. "Just try not to install laser defense grids next, okay?" "No promises," I winked. "So yeah. Karen banned my hose. And sure, maybe spending multiple weekends digging trenches like a demented gopher, dropping a significant chunk of change on plumbing supplies, and risking marital harmony was a slight overreaction. A disproportionate response, perhaps. But every morning, when I look out at that emerald green perfection, glistening with precisely metered hydration, absolutely thriving without a single visible hose, and I catch Carol peeking through her blinds, her face tight with impotent rage? Totally. Worth it. Now, Gary was telling me about this ultrasonic device that supposedly repels moles. I wonder if they come in a Wi-Fi version. "Honey, where's my tablet?"